In our hyper-connected world, help is just a phone call away. We take it for granted that in a crisis, we can dial a number and a calm, professional voice will be there, a lifeline to safety. A single call can dispatch police, firefighters, or an ambulance in minutes, bridging the gap between life and death. But what happens when that lifeline snaps? When the connection is there, but help feels a world away? Emergency dispatchers are the unseen heroes of our worst moments. They are trained to be a steady presence in the storm, guiding terrified voices through chaos. They listen to fear, to pain, and to desperation, carrying the emotional weight of 1,000 different tragedies. For every call that ends with the reassuring sound of sirens arriving, with a life saved and a crisis averted, there's another kind. A call that ends abruptly. A call that ends in chilling silence. A silence that lingers in the dispatcher's mind long after the line goes dead. This isn't about fictional thrillers or dramatic reenactments. We're going to delve into real emergency calls where the system worked. The connection was made, but fate had other plans. These are stories where help was just around the corner, yet for some inexplicable reason, it wasn't enough. We'll explore the haunting circumstances and the unanswered questions left behind when a desperate plea for help becomes the final words someone ever speaks. Imagine being on the phone with someone in their final moments, hearing everything unfold, powerless to do anything more than listen. That's the reality for dispatchers in these rare, terrifying cases. One such story involves a woman who called 911, whispering that an intruder was in her house. The dispatcher kept her on the line, trying to gather crucial details while officers raced to the scene. The call captured every terrifying second, the sound of floorboards creaking, a muffled confrontation, and then nothing. Officers arrived just minutes later, but it was too late. The silence on the other end of the line was permanent. Then there's the case of a hiker, lost and injured in a remote wilderness area. He managed to get a weak signal and call for help. He described his surroundings as best he could, his voice growing weaker with each passing minute. The search and rescue team was deployed immediately, using the call data to try and pinpoint his location. They were so close they could hear the rescue helicopter in the background of the call before the battery on his phone died. For days, they searched, but he was never found. The call is all that remains, a ghostly recording of hope fading into the vast, unforgiving wilderness. These stories aren't meant to scare you or make you lose faith in emergency services, which save countless lives every single day. Instead, they serve as a powerful and somber reminder of human fragility. They highlight the immense pressure on dispatchers and first responders, and the haunting reality that sometimes, despite everyone's best efforts, things go terribly wrong. These are the calls that are never forgotten. The silent echoes that remind us how fragile that connection between a voice in the dark and the arrival of help can truly be. Thank you for joining me in exploring these profound and difficult stories. If you found this content thought-provoking, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the human experience. Stay safe out there. Have you ever wondered what it is like to be on the other end of a 911 call when things go terribly wrong? What you're about to hear is a story that started as a minor inconvenience but spiraled into a tragedy, all because of a single devastating mistake. It's a chilling reminder of how fragile life can be and how one wrong turn can change everything. Our story begins on a quiet weekday evening. The sun had set, and the city's industrial district was winding down for the night. A 34-year-old warehouse supervisor named Daniel Reeves found himself in a frustrating but seemingly ordinary situation. He was stuck. He picked up his phone and dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, Daniel's voice was remarkably calm. He explained that he was trapped inside an old freight elevator, which had abruptly stopped between floors. To the experienced dispatcher on the line, this call probably sounded routine. Elevators get stuck all the time, right? It's an annoyance, a disruption, but rarely a life or death scenario. Daniel, however, added a couple of details that subtly shifted the tone of the call. He mentioned that the warehouse would be locked up for the night soon, and more worrisomely, the elevator car felt unusually hot. The dispatcher, following protocol, reassured him. Help was on its way. She asked him to stay on the line, a standard procedure to keep the caller calm and gather more information if needed. As the minutes ticked by, an unsettling new detail emerged. Daniel mentioned a strange smell. Something metallic and acrid filling the small space. His calm demeanor began to crack. His breathing, once steady, was now becoming shallow. He started to gasp for air between his words. What neither Daniel nor the dispatcher could possibly know was that a severe mechanical failure was silently unfolding. A broken component was overheating, releasing a cloud of toxic fumes that was now seeping into the elevator shaft and, inevitably, into the car where Daniel was trapped. Meanwhile, a critical error was happening behind the scenes. In the rush to dispatch emergency services, a small mix-up occurred with the address. It was a simple mistake, a single digit off, but it sent the fire and rescue team to the wrong warehouse just a few blocks away. Every second they spent searching the wrong building was a second Daniel didn't have. Back on the phone, Daniel's condition was deteriorating rapidly. He was trying to stay calm, just as the dispatcher had instructed, but the toxic air was taking its toll. His words became slower, his voice weaker and more strained. The poison was overwhelming his system. His initial frustration had melted away, replaced by a primal fear. In a voice that was barely more than a whisper, he pleaded with the dispatcher. "Please don't hang up." It was a desperate plea for connection, a voice in the dark as his world closed in around him. Shortly after that, his words were consumed by violent coughing fits. The dispatcher could only listen, helpless, as the man on the other end of the line fought for every breath. Then the coughing stopped. The line didn't disconnect, but it fell completely silent. The only sound was the empty air of a connection to nowhere. By the time the rescue team realized their mistake and raced to the correct location, it was far too late. They forced the elevator doors open, only to be met with a scene of tragedy. Daniel Reeves was gone. A simple call for help, a routine situation, had ended in the most heartbreaking way imaginable. One small error, a single wrong address, had cost a man his life. And for the dispatcher who heard his final words, his fading voice and that haunting silence would become a memory she could never escape. It's a powerful story about how quickly things can go wrong, and a tribute to the voice that was lost that night. Thank you for listening. If you find stories like this compelling, please consider subscribing for more. Stay safe out there. This is a story that reveals a terrifying truth about the systems we rely on for our safety. It's a story about Maria Alvarez, and it begins with a phone call just after midnight. Maria was 62 years old and lived by herself in a small apartment. She called 911 to report a small fire in her kitchen. The stove had malfunctioned. She was remarkably calm, explaining that the flames were already out, but her apartment was quickly filling with thick smoke. Maria had asthma, and the smoke was making it hard for her to breathe. She told the dispatcher she was unable to get down the stairs on her own and was waiting by her front door for help to arrive. Throughout the call, she kept apologizing, worried she was being a burden. It's heartbreaking to think about, in her moment of crisis. She was more concerned about inconveniencing others than for her own safety. As sirens wailed in the background, growing louder and louder, a hint of fear finally crept into Maria's voice. She asked softly, "They know I'm still inside, right?" The dispatcher, trying to be a calming presence, assured her, "Yes, Maria, they know. Help is on the way." But this is where the system, the very one designed to save her, began to crumble. A critical piece of information that a vulnerable resident was trapped inside failed to reach the first responders on the scene. The firefighters arriving at the building operated under the assumption that the apartment had already been evacuated. They saw no flames, no immediate signs of danger from the outside, and began their standard procedures for a contained incident. They didn't know Maria was still inside, waiting, trusting that help was just moments away. Back on the phone, precious minutes were ticking by. The dispatcher could hear the change in Maria's condition. Her breathing became a desperate, rasping struggle for air. The smoke was taking its toll. Her sentences, once clear, became fragmented and short. Her voice, once calm, now trembled with exhaustion and fear. "I'm so tired," she managed to whisper. The dispatcher continued to offer words of comfort, telling her to hang on, completely unaware that no one was actually going in to get her. No rescue attempt was underway. The firefighters outside were securing the scene, following a protocol that didn't account for the woman slowly suffocating just a few floors above them. And then the line went silent. The dispatcher called her name again and again. "Maria. Maria, are you there?" But there was no reply. It's just an empty, chilling silence. It was only then, after the silence, that the full weight of the miscommunication became clear. When firefighters finally forced their way into the smoke-filled apartment, it was too late. They found Maria near the door, exactly where she said she would be. She had passed away from smoke inhalation, a victim not of the fire itself, but of a catastrophic failure in communication. Maria Alvarez's story is not just a tragedy, it's a stark warning. She did everything right. She called for help. She gave her exact location. She explained her vulnerability. But the system failed to connect the dots. Her call for help became just a piece of data that got lost in translation between the dispatch center and the boots on the ground. This incident forced a hard look at emergency response protocols, highlighting the devastating consequences of simple assumptions and communication breakdowns. It led to changes, 2 new procedures designed to ensure that the human element, the desperate voice on the other end of the line, is never overlooked again. Maria's final words on that call were a question filled with trust. "They know I'm still inside, right?" Her story compels us to demand a system that can always answer with a definitive yes. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, Please consider sharing it to raise awareness about the importance of effective emergency communication. Subscribe for more stories that matter. Stay safe. But incredibly important, the world of emergency dispatchers and the calls that haunt them long after the line goes dead. We all trust that when we dial for help, someone on the other end will make sure it arrives. But what happens when that system, for one reason or another, breaks down? Let's start with a story. A woman calls, her voice steady, reporting a domestic dispute. She's calm, almost too calm. She gives her address, answers the questions, and hangs up. On the surface, it seems routine, but help arrives too late. Another city, another call. A man is trapped, his breathing shallow. He whispers his location, certain that rescuers are just minutes away. They never find him in time. Someone must have made a huge mistake, but when investigators looked into these cases and countless others like them, they didn't find one single catastrophic error. Instead, they found a chain of small, almost invisible failures. It was a series of tiny cracks in the system that, when combined, led to a complete collapse. Think of it like a domino effect. A slight miscommunication here, a wrong assumption there. A dispatcher hears the words, but maybe doesn't fully grasp the urgency behind them. Each breakdown on its own might seem minor, almost insignificant, but together, they create a fatal gap. They're dissected in training seminars, used to rewrite policies, and become the focus of intense internal investigations. The goal, of course, is to learn, to improve, to ensure it never happens again. But for the dispatchers who were on those lines, the ones who heard the calm voices and felt the trust placed in them, the damage is already done. The learning comes at a heavy price. They remember every detail. The sound of a shaky breath, the misplaced confidence in a voice saying, "I'm sure they're almost here,"